Thank you, Harinder. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited that you're all here. This has been, as Harinder said, many months in the making, and the contestants are, as we say, the brave ones who made it till the end and are here to pitch to you today. So really excited for you all to hear what they've been working on. And we can start with, let's see. So before, okay. So before going into the pitches, so I want to acknowledge our judges who are here today, some of whom have been in the course since the beginning. Chanel, who's a program officer at NASIM, Arliss, who is a city council member at Costa Mesa, Gary McDowell, who's the CEO of Lateroller and has worked with us at Future of Research for many years. We also have Artie, who is the founder and chair of ESAL, if you don't know about that, you should definitely check it out. T'Pring is currently Chief Policy Director at California Issues Forum. Melinda Gormley, who is an R&D officer at UC Irvine, and Matt Hansen, who is Director of New Ventures at UCI Applied Innovation. All right, great. So we're going to go in order of the flyer, starting with Paige, who is going to talk to us about STEM education.
Hello. So hello, Superintendent Damara. My name is Paige Greenwood, and I am a fifth-year neuroscience doctoral candidate at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, better known as STEM, has been considered key in the state of Ohio's economic growth and prosperity by preparing future STEM leaders. Through this emerged the Ohio STEM Learning Network, which established K-12 STEM learning schools through partnerships between businesses and the Ohio Department of Education. The Ohio STEM Committee approves STEM school applications in the state of Ohio, with the primary benefits of STEM education being experimentation, fostering problem solving, and teamwork. However, gaps in access and outcomes of STEM achievement for underrepresented minorities and low-income students are often still overlooked. 47% of Ohio students are considered low income based on qualifying for free or reduced lunch. According to the nation's report card, these students underperform on science and math achievement tests compared to students that did not qualify. In addition, we also see gaps in racial disparities. Black and Hispanic students perform more poorly on science and math achievement tests compared to white students in Ohio. So again, how is the Ohio STEM Learning Network being intentional about recruiting underrepresented minority students in STEM and establishing STEM learning schools in low-income and minority-serving communities? I propose that the Ohio STEM Committee update policies in House Bill 119 to include a diversity and inclusion task force that aims to increase underrepresented minorities in STEM by targeting schools in Ohio that serve these populations. As data shows, the minority and low-income students underperform in STEM. More funding should be aimed at understanding STEM achievement for various demographics to create more targeted curriculums that are representative of the needs of each student. Partnerships should be established between the Ohio STEM Learning Network and research universities in the state of Ohio as stakeholders in the growth and development of STEM learning. We must understand that it is critical that there is diversity in STEM, and we lay the foundation for our future leaders. We can no longer be complacent and say that the pipeline of diverse scientists in STEM is broken if we aren't actively doing everything that we can in our power to fix it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have questions from any of our judges?
I have one question. Just, do you think the priority is creating the task force, or is the priority, other ways of targeting these schools that you've identified?
So I think it's a mixture of both, specifically because in the mission, the organization or the Ohio STEM Learning Network states that they're going to target schools in geographically diverse locations. But when you look at the map for schools that are actually STEM learning schools in Ohio, it's not representative of counties or districts that are low income within the state of Ohio. So I feel like having this task force would be able to hold the Ohio STEM Committee accountable in choosing proposals that actually are representative of the students that are in Ohio and make it more diverse.
And this is Matt Hansen. A similar question. It's one thing to create a panel and layers of bureaucracy. It's another thing to put money in action. When does the money get down to the student? When does, how much, that's my thrust is, the state government holds the purse, and the most impactful thing you can do is get money where the rubber meets the road. So is there something where money can get to the students and the teachers as opposed to some middle layer of a task force?
Absolutely. So many of the STEM learning schools are privately funded. So they're like independent public schools in a way. So they don't, although they qualify for state funds, a lot of them don't meet the same requirements as traditional public schools. So there's this plethora of money from the Bill Gates Foundation and many other business partners like Battelle who have invested in these schools. And so it should come down to making sure that funding is equally distributed amongst the students, but maybe a primary focus on the ones that are in economically disadvantaged populations. I hope that answers your question.
And I was just curious, one more question on your metrics of success. You had mentioned the scores, math and science scores in different schools. Is that the metric you would be looking at, or are you looking at sort of a different array of participation in these special schools? How do you measure whether we're making progress?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ohio has this database called the Ohio Report Cards, and it provides academic achievement, improvements in whether or not the gap in achievement have been less widened, if that's the word. And you can look at a school by school basis on their progress from the years before that to how they're performing currently. And they also give you demographic breakdowns of that. So one thing that I encourage the Ohio STEM Learning Network to do is be more transparent about the students' achievement levels within these schools. I think they're more so focused on saying that they have this wide range of economically disadvantaged children, or they focus often on using words like ethnically diverse populations, without really showing us the breakdowns of how, there are Black students, there are Hispanic students, there are Asian students that are within these districts. And we could be able to assess the performance using the Ohio Report Cards measures.
Great.
Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Paige.
Thank
So
you, guys.
hopefully you're all able to provide scores, and please provide comments as well for Paige to read afterwards. So we can move on to Anna, who will talk to us about cancer research policy.
Hi. Yes. So, hi, Senator Feinstein. My name is Anna, and I'm a graduate student at UC Irvine. As most of us know, cancer does not discriminate, and because of this, so many people are affected by it every single day. As part of the academic community, I'm amongst many scientists who are all passionate about cancer research and helping to ease the burden that cancer places on our society. I first want to thank you for your previous and continuing support of biomedical research, and specifically cancer-related research. However, I am here to ask for your support and increased funding for the National Cancer Institute, or the NCI. Cancer is currently the second leading cause of death in the US. Almost 5,000 new cases are diagnosed every day, and unfortunately, about 1,600 lives are lost daily. And because of this, every single one of us has, or will most likely be impacted by cancer to some degree. Thankfully, my mom is healthy now, but she battled thyroid cancer for many years when I was younger. Even though she did her best to hide her illness from me, the day I saw her faint while walking to the bedroom will be engraved in my mind forever. Many have stories like this, and many have stories that are much worse. But the good news is that we are making a lot of amazing improvements in this field, creating more therapies and treatments. And a huge reason for that is the research that is funded from the NCI. Even though in recent years there has been a movement to provide more funding to the NCI through the 21st Century CARES Act, the costs associated with research continue to increase, resulting in slower development of treatments. Cancer is hundreds of different diseases that all fall under this one name. Each disease needs individual research to provide individualized treatments. In order for us to keep making strides in this field, the NCI needs funding that can keep up with both the increased cost of cancer research as well as with inflation. And so again, I ask for your support in increasing the NCI budget by an additional $989 million. Can I count on your support? Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your pitch and your personal story. That was really impactful. Do we have any questions?
Yes, this is Matt Hansen again. You mentioned the costs are increasing. One thing that can be helpful when you ask for money from a government agency, understanding that it's not like there's a money tree or something, is to also explain to them where costs can be reduced to free up money, or other programs where money can be taken from to support yours. That gives them something to play with on the chessboard, as opposed to just having you compete against someone else. So is there something you can do to address the costs associated with cancer research?
I'm not positive. Thank you first for your comment. That's a really good point. I'm not exactly sure where costs can be reduced, but there are a lot of statistics showing how this ends up bringing money back into the government. So even though they are investing this money up front with, it is a lot of money for research, it does end up in more patents, more drug developments, more of these things that end up bringing money eventually back into the system.
Yeah, so I have a question sort of related to that, to what Matt just asked as well. And, you know, I used to work at OMB and oversee federal budgets, so R&D budgets. So this is a little bit informed by that. But I think, you know, one of the questions I have for you is, you know, you've sort of mentioned that increases to the NCI budget need to, you know, keep up both with inflation and with the sort of increasing cost of cancer research. You know, there are opportunity costs associated with that, but I'm wondering if you also have any sort of sense of what what is the projected rate of the growth in the costs associated with that type of research? Like, why this number, I think 989, will that keep up with it? And if not, I mean, do we need a 10% annual growth rate? You know, do you have any information about that?
Yeah, so in this $989 million, it's actually broken down into specifics. So 314 million of that is inflation adjustment. And then other parts of it then go into the understanding cancer, preventing cancer, different aspects of cancer research, with a portion of that going to like training and infrastructure, so that it's already accounting for the specific inflation that we have at this moment. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, it starts to, I guess. So what you're saying is that the non-inflation related costs are growing about twice as fast as inflation itself, and they're multifaceted. They include training and certain other things, not just like the cost of reagents, for example. Okay.
I have a question and comment for Anna. Great job, really impressed. One thing that I was thinking as a listener is, one thing that would be helpful is to add to a sense of urgency with your ask. So you could speak to the value of what this money would pay for. So I'm thinking if you had any sense of what emergent therapeutic breakthroughs are just on the horizon, sort of getting the listener excited about what's just out of reach, and this money will help get us there. You could also highlight how, the best research, a lot of it anyway, is done like right here in the US, and that, that puts us in a great position to be a leader. And so if you could sort of titillate us, a bit with, new technologies or new methods that have a lot of promise, and this money will help perhaps deliver some of that promise, I think that helps your ask.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a great point.
Great, thank you for all those points. Very helpful. So we'll move on now to Kamal, who will talk to us about childcare reimbursement.
Hi, my name is Komal Sayed, and I'm a PhD candidate in material science and engineering at University of California, Irvine. I'm also mother of a young toddler. Like me, there are many other graduate students who are trying to achieve their career goals while also maintaining parental responsibilities. Therefore, childcare or daycare is must for us. Unfortunately, the childcare expenses are off the roof. In places like Irvine, where we live, it can easily cost on average about $4,000 to $5,000 per quarter, and even more for families who have more children. UCI does have a childcare reimbursement program, which comes under the umbrella of a collective bargaining agreement between UCI and United Auto Workers Union. This agreement allows graduate students to get a reimbursement up to $1,100 for each quarter. While we are so grateful for it, unfortunately, it's not enough. We love the research we do for UCI, and our goal is to really do our best work for UCI. But when so much of our resources are being spent on childcare expenses, it does put a lot of financial burden on many graduate students, especially that most of the graduate students are in the low income bracket. This reimbursement amount of $1,100 has not changed since 2014, while the cost of living expenses in Irvine keeps increasing every year. Therefore, today I ask the Dean of Graduate Division at UCI, Ms. Jillian Hayes, to renegotiate this contract and consider increasing the cost of reimbursement from $1,100 per quarter to $1,500 for each quarter. While this may not seem like a substantial ask to some, this extra help can really alleviate the financial stress of many graduate students. Thank you so much for your time and for your care.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important issue. And I know some of you, I'm curious if you have questions, if you're working on local issues in California or education issues for Kamal that you want to ask.
I have one question. Sorry, I don't live in Irvine. I do live in California, so I can speak to the cost of childcare where I live. But what is the typical childcare costs, and what are the various options, especially that a student could take advantage of?
Sure. So the easiest in terms of the place of access, UCI Irvine itself has the daycare, but the wait list is extremely long, to the point that 1 year to 18 months is considered a normal waitlist time. So most students have to look for outside options, which may be cheaper, may be expensive. Most students, like myself, who are full-time enrolled, need a full-time daycare. So on average per month, what I paid, and I did a quick survey from graduate students living in the family housing, can be anywhere from $3,000 up all the way to $9,000 for a quarter. And when I say quarter, I mean like a 3-month period. And that's why I averaged it to about 4,000 to 5,000. And that was my experience, and I shared that with many others. The reimbursement that I mentioned, UCI does have a program, but unfortunately, it kind of lacks at the moment.
Oh, I have a question. So your request is to increase the reimbursement, but I'm not clear why you got to that as a solution compared to, increasing the numbers of children that can be on the on-campus support, that's at an affordable cost, or providing, a placement program for external places? Like, how did you come to that as we need more money to afford it? And is that, sufficient, and how much would that cost the school? And are there any alternatives?
Sure. So the on-campus or the UCI daycare that there is this both for students and for faculty and staff. So it's pretty much the same. And it's actually among one of the most expensive daycares in Irvine. When I was looking for it, it was among actually the higher end of daycare cost. While on the other side of Irvine, there were much cheaper options. So that's one of the first thing where a faculty member may not have a problem of a cost of paying $1,800 to $2,000 per month. But a graduate student whose salary itself is $1,800, imagine using that whole money giving to a daycare. So that's not really possible. While they offer the same reimbursement like they do for any other daycare, $1,100 for the whole quarter, which comes out to be about $350 or so, per month. The issue is you don't get the reimbursement until months later. It's a very slow process.
All travelers, if any unknown person attempts to give you any
I think if someone can please mute.
Can you mute?
Do not.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So basically, the cost itself is really not that affordable. So it basically becomes on the parents themselves to figure out what they can manage. There are single parents, there are parents who have partners who can support the financial cost. So there's a huge variation. And therefore, the reason why I asked for this slight increase, when I did a quick survey within the family housing, most people would hope to at least have $2,000 reimbursement amount. But while we're in the middle of a pandemic, I know there's a lot of other priorities for the university, and this may not be their top goal. And this contract will be up for renegotiation next June. So it's like an yearly contract that gets renewed every year. So that's why I thought of pitching something which is also makes sense from the point of view we are in very unprecedented times, but at the same time also takes care of some of the financial needs of the students. It would be great to have a bigger daycare, but I don't see that happening for the next few years. We already, they're building more housing, but there's very limited space for childcare. But that could be another a long-term solution would be have, possibly have more enrollment. Yeah.
A similar comment. I'm not asking you to give specifics because I don't know what they are and they may not exist. But generally speaking, if you come and you make an ask, you might want to explain what other benefits you have that are either directly cash, directly reimbursement, or cost offsets, or everything else that shows that you're leveraging every other possible means. Also, these issues, if you don't address them in full, they're going to come back year after year after year after year. So it's probably a good idea to just ask for a small one now, but be transparent about the fact you're probably going to come back next year and ask for a little bit more, right? Maybe show a plan to where this can over time start to close that gap, as opposed to just coming back and asking, every year for an increase. Because at some point they're just going to say, I've seen you before. But so if you can weave that in. By the way, all the speakers so far have added a personal story. I think that's great. You're going to be talking to human beings and they're going to resonate with these things. So.
Thank you so much. This is a very good point. Thank you all for your questions.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kamal. Okay, so next we have Elena, who will discuss the Extinction Prevention Act.
Can everyone hear me? So hi, I'm from Texas. I'll be addressing Senator Cornyn. Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Elena. I'm a second-year PhD student at Rice University, and I'd like to talk to you about infectious diseases like COVID-19, which affect everyone. We are searching for ways to minimize the emergence and spread of future viral diseases. One important way we can do this is to pass the Extinction Prevention Act to protect biodiversity. Over the last few decades, we have seen an increase in the spread and prevalence of emerging infectious diseases. There have been a number of other outbreaks like SARS-CoV, previous SARS-CoV, Zika, Ebola. They all spread differently, but they all take tremendous tolls on our communities. We have experienced loss of life, illness, and economic impacts at all social levels. As we search for ways to prevent or ameliorate future viral outbreaks, we cannot ignore one of the key drivers of disease emergence and transmission: the environmental impact of human activities, specifically activities that weaken biodiversity. Human activities like deforestation have endangered the richness of life, the stability of ecosystems, and the survival of many species. We are currently facing this ongoing extinction crisis that directly affects the health of our American communities. There is an abundance of peer-reviewed scientific evidence concluding that biodiversity can help protect animal and human populations against infectious diseases. Studies have shown that a loss in biodiversity can increase transmission of animal and human disease. Our ecosystems exist in complex network balance, and biodiversity is critical towards maintaining this balance. The loss of even one species can introduce a significant perturbance into these ecological networks and have vast impacts across all other levels of life. And we are at one of those levels. We aren't isolated, we don't live alone, we are part of the network. We share our home and our planet, and its health affects ours. And the benefit of conservation efforts in the case of disease transmission is twofold. First, conserving species diversity can protect ecosystems against the spread of infectious disease. And second, by preserving some land only for animal habitats, we actually limit the contact between humans and wildlife, which is another factor that enables transmission of new diseases from wildlife. So I'm here to advocate for biodiversity protection through conservation efforts as an additional strategy to improve public health. And we can do something to support this right now. We can pass the Extinction Prevention Act, which will create dedicated funds for the conservation of butterflies, sea turtles, and other threatened species facing extinction, species that are all valuable and beautiful components of our North American ecosystems. And these kinds of provisions have previously been successful in saving 99% of their protected animals from extinction. Animals like the gray whale, the Florida manatee, the bald eagle. By supporting this act to protect our beautiful wildlife, you can also help protect the health of our American communities. Please vote to pass the Extinction Prevention Act.
Great job, thank you. Any questions or comments?
Hey, Elena, that was fantastic. I really loved your opening lines. It was really clear right away who you are, where you come from, and what you want to talk about, the first two sentences. I really appreciate that. My comments are mainly about delivery. I understand that nerves might be at play. So first of all, I'm really proud of you for doing such a good job, but definitely slow down. You could probably speak at like 50 to 75% the speed that you are, and I talk fast, and so this is something that I notice in myself. But in conversational speech, there are natural like pause lines, and there are ebbs and flows. And this is commentary for everyone, because I've noticed it sort of across the students, that reading verbatim is great because you have all of the content, but then sometimes you lose the natural musicality in your voice. And so it can begin to feel a little bit less conversational and more like you're being presented at. And so and this totally comes with practice. As you get more familiar with your pitch, you can just have bullet points as a guide and then really be just sort of like talking like the folks were talking during the Q&A, and that really draws the listener in. It's sort of more engaging. So my only advice for you is to like pull back a bit from relying on text and like let yourself flow and find those natural pause points, especially if you're doing a list. Thing one, let it sink in. Thing two, let it sink in. Thing three, right? You can also use conversational modifiers like right and or I think, which kind of just gives it, just a little bit more of a relaxed feel. So this is commentary for everyone, but again, Elena, really fantastic job.
Thanks for the feedback. I definitely know I tend to talk a little fast. I did have bullets. I think one of my concerns was that there was like the 3-minute limit, and I didn't want to like pass it because I really wanted to focus on like this two-faceted approach to defending biodiversity that might relate more to maybe like conservative audiences than previous approaches. So it was like a lot of material to get in 3 minutes. But yeah, I think definitely like maybe shortening the speech too would be better. So thank you for your feedback.
Absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on that too. So far, everyone's seems very poised and comfortable, even though I know this is really kind of uncomfortable. Plus we're over Zoom. Usually we've been doing these pitches. So I've worked with Bree personally for myself and with UCI students. And I know she says, take out those fillers, right? She, as I'm saying, right. I know I've had that comment. And so she would recommend us taking out those fillers, removing the ums, projecting, leaning forward. So just remember all of it comes with practice. So you guys are doing an excellent job. I do actually have something on the content of this. There seemed to be a lot of importance, like I got it, it's important, it'll reduce COVID and COVID-like illnesses in the future, but I'm not exactly sure why I should spend my money on that or support this act in comparison to other things that could be done. Could you elaborate on that a little?
Yes, so there's definitely many things that could be done from like an epidemiological and like public health perspective. But actually like the cause and increased prevalence of these emergent diseases has not really been determined yet. And one of the leading theories we actually have right now is this loss of biodiversity. It's a very compelling reason based on the current scientific literature. And I just wanted to kind of advocate for that as a possible solution to be used in conjunction with public health measures. And I would also argue that public health measures will help us prevent the transmission of the disease among our own population, but may not be very effective in long-term solutions towards preventing the increase in the emergence of these diseases and the general spread of infectious diseases.
Yeah, I really appreciate that last comment. And then what you just shared, Elena, I think would have been a really compelling intro. Like, did you know that one of the leading sort of areas of thought of the cause or ways to stop the spread of diseases is protecting biodiversity? So I think you shared a lot of really good information, and I was trying to like catalog it all, but I think sometimes sort of simplifying and just like leaving me with one really like interesting fact, or starting with an interesting fact and kind of revisiting that could help sort of keep the focus on the value of this investment. So I was looking for like a did you know fact, or something that like I'm going to run to my, at dinner and talk to my friends at dinner about. Like, did you guys know this?
Okay, yeah, that would definitely help improve it for the future. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your feedback. Thank you, Elena. So next we have Ravindra, who will be talking about funding scientific societies.
Hello, Representative Haley Stevens. Congrats on your re-election. My name is Ravindra. I'm here to ask for your support to fund scientific society journals and move toward a sustainable academic publishing. As you know, taxpayer money funds for most research, but they're being double taxed, first to fund the research and then to access the research articles. Even though researchers like me write and peer review articles for free, commercial publishers make as much profit as companies like Google make just by charging the universities and public for accessing or publishing the research articles. As a researcher, I have to pay up to $6,000 to publish one article in a high impact open access journal. Again, we write and peer review articles for free, and that $6,000 could have funded a grad student for up to 3 months. So this directly affects inclusion and diversity in the scientific community and puts a burden on the taxpayer money. That is why we need your support to allocate funds to society journals so that we can avoid overly relying on these commercial publishers who use academic free labor but pocket huge profits. As a chairwoman of the House Subcommittee on Research and Technology, you talked about the RISE Act, authorizing $26 to fund university research in response to COVID-19 and to support early career researchers like me. Thank you for that. And we ask that you allocate at least $10 million to fund scientific society journals so that we can make research accessible for free for all. This policy will definitely reap more benefits on the investment, as the scientific societies can invest any generated profit back into the community, unlike the commercial publishers. And this can also improve diversity in the scientific community. And using these funds, scientific societies can also help foster public understanding of the scientific process, which is needed in America right now. And the new administration can easily actively promote the public understanding of scientific process. So funding scientific society journals is more affordable and sustainable and can make science accessible for all. Science needs your support, so let's fund scientific society journals, and I'm happy to be your resource to work on this issue with you. Thank you.
Hi, just to comment, it struck me, I understand the problem. I was, it was compelling. It's a real issue that you've uncovered. But then it struck me, awkwardly that you're saying these publishers are making a lot of money, and so you want the government to pay them a lot of money. That's what
No.
it sounded like. Now, maybe you meant something different?
No, I meant to fund the scientific society journals who are not run by the commercial publishers. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the commercial publishers are using the academic free labor, but they get all the profit. But unlike the scientific society journals, which can actually invest back into the community, which is what I mentioned as well.
Okay, I lost the distinction. Thank you for that. And the second part was, and this is not meant to, I know my comment is not part of this discussion, other than I might play the role of the legislator that you're talking to, or the staff member, and I might ask, why does it cost anybody anything? I mean, we have put encyclopedias out of business because of Wikipedia. Could this not be a free forum where things are vetted? I mean, you're doing the work, you're doing the peer reviews. Why not just make it all freely available? I know that's beyond the scope of this, but the question is, if I'm that person, I might be asking that question like that. Right? So.
That's a good point, actually. We do write articles for free, we do peer review for free, but there is cost for production, there is cost for typesetting the whole thing, there's cost for fact and also for plagiarism, and also you have to pay for the staff for doing all of this. And so again, so somebody has actually calculated how much it costs to publish one research article. And apparently it's around $400 on average, but commercial publishers actually can charge you somewhere up to $6,000, which is a lot of difference. And all that profit that they're making just goes to them. And especially because if scientific society journals can actually do the job that they're doing with some more extra funding, I think it's more affordable and sustainable to actually and let them take over the value that the commercial publishers add to it, right? So the commercial publishers definitely have a role in publishing, so they do add some value, but it's not worth the profit that we actually voluntarily give them, right? So there are obviously alternatives which are more sustainable, so why not support them?
Thank you.
Yeah, piggybacking off of Matthew, I agree that you could really jazz up your reader with emotional resonance by bringing in some righteous indignation. Someone else mentioned like a did you know? So in the beginning, my one comment would be not everyone might be familiar with like the landscape of academic publishing. They might not even know you have to pay it. So it could be a fun, did you know that if you wanted to go read the latest and greatest article about COVID, that was done at a publicly funded university with publicly, provided grant money, that you would have to pay upwards of, $20 per article. Did you know that? That seems really unfair. Well, here's the current model, and then you describe the business case. I think that model is garbage. Here's a new model. So I think that's sort of easier to understand. It's a bit more linear, and so I think that I would it might help to sort of simplify. But this is something I'm really passionate about, and so I think it's okay to sort of show your frustration and get the listener frustrated with you. And then they're on your side when you propose this new solution.
That's a very good point. In fact, I actually wrote an article with the same exact structure that you mentioned. Like,
oh, really?
Okay. All the current models, and try to say what is actually wrong and what can we actually do to make it better. and make it work for the community as well, not just the commercial publishers. And yeah, I think I agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why I put the $6,000 figure as well, because that's
Right.
something which is ridiculous compared to the cost that it takes to publish one article. And then compared to the salary that the PhD students who most often write these articles get paid. And so that's why I wanted to bring that point, and also bring the point that the profits that they make are like companies like Google make as much profit, but they have a different value that they're adding. But the value that the commercial publishers adding isn't as it doesn't actually deserve as much as it does right now. Yeah, so that's why I've included some of those points to highlight that stark contrast.
Absolutely. It's an example of storytelling. One way that you can sort of ground it in real life, since science can seem sort of abstract and distant to people, is to have like a vignette. Say there's a mother who wants to understand the research better about COVID impacts on her child. And she goes online, you tell a little story, and then it's just, it's easier for the listener to sort of understand the significance of this problem.
Got it. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks everybody. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Robbie. So keeping on with the academic issues, we'll move on to Jamil, who will talk to us about postdoc training.
Hi, everyone. I'm addressing my pitch to Dr. Jack Hu. He's the Vice President of Research at the University of Georgia. Dr. Jack Hu, thank you for taking some time out to speak with me. My name is Anam Jamil, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Genetics at University of Georgia. I'm interested in talking to you today about postdoctoral training. To train the best scientists, we need to encourage innovative, collaborative work and cultivate a diverse workplace. Most recently, or more recently, the major research funding agencies like the NIH, the NSF, USDA are prioritizing funding collaborative grants. In order to be competitive for these funds, institutions similar to us, UC Davis and Michigan State, have created university-supported postdoc positions that are targeted to work across multiple laboratories. These positions incentivize collaboration, are now the gold standard of research in the life sciences, attracting thousands of the most qualified applicants nationally as well as internationally. I myself am planning to apply for these positions once I finish my degree. I'm advocating that the university sponsor 5 collaborative postdoc fellowships for 2 years, amounting to a total of $600,000. The cost can be made back multiple-fold with potential grant funding, as these fellowships will enhance interdepartmental and cross-disciplinary collaboration. Additionally, I envision that we can take what previous institutions have done and take it one step further and aim to diversify our workforce here in Georgia. We can use these positions to provide a pipeline for fellows to become research faculty here at UGA. By allocating $600,000 for 5 positions, the fellows will also have access to independent research funds and lead community building and network activities, like symposiums on epigenome research or workshops in science communication. This effort will also expose graduate students to international and national searches, and above all, fantastic role models. If we truly hope to train the future's faculty and industry leaders, we need to cultivate a place at UGA for postdocs. To put it simply, spending $600,000 to fund these collaborative and university-sponsored fellowships is a small investment when compared to the impact it will have for UGA's future as a leader in research. I appreciate the time you've given me, and do you have any other questions I can answer?
Hey, thank you. Any questions?
The question, did you have any dollars sort of tied to the benefit? You mentioned having these positions sort of better positions the university for grant money. Is there any sort of dollar amount we can tie to that? Or dollar amount to tie to the benefit of having the positions?
I see. Yeah, I've actually sent some emails out to the directors of those other postdoctoral programs asking about like, well, how much money does this, are you asking about how much like grant funding money on average other positions have brought in?
Yeah, well, it seems like a pretty low risk thing, right? Based on what you're describing, the sort of value to the university in terms of attracting applicants, the possibility for getting additional grant money, the benefits from it. Be great to sort of solidify that as a pretty low risk investment.
Yeah, definitely. In the process of, trying to gather data. I haven't gotten feedback yet, but for this class, actually, I'm trying to write an op-ed trying to advocate. So I'm getting some data from those directors about like, well, what grants have you funded? Because the most I guess well-known one that I'm refer here is the Center for Population Biology postdoc at UC Davis, and I think that a lot of students, a lot of fellows that come out of that program go on to then become faculty at other programs, but still have ties to that initial thing and write grants with those faculty members there. But I don't have a good example to give you of a multi-million-dollar grant that was achieved. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
Along
No problem.
along similar lines, two things, if I can keep them both in my head at the same time. It might be helpful to not say, if you spend more money, it'll help our reputation, because then, why aren't you asking for $1 billion? Because that would really help our reputation. On the other hand, if you came in and said, look, we can go and get this grant if you put this money up in matching, right? So it's leveraging other people's money and not just asking one source for all of it. The other thing you might do is be able to point out, and it's similar to the earlier comment, that if you invest in this, we could go and get grants that we could never have gotten before, right? Because that grant money that you're going to get in the future is going to go pay for other expenses. But if I couldn't get it unless I had this sort of interdisciplinary investment, it would make it a little more attractive than just saying, hey, my reputation. Not just the reputation, but you can go get stuff you could never get before if you made this investment, right? So it's a question of leverage on both points. Can you use it as cost matching to a current grant you're pursuing, or can you get grants you could never get before?
That's a really great point. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Do you have any data on how competitive postdoc positions are at GA? Like how many people are applying? Because, if you had a sense whether this could increase the number of people who might be interested in postdocing at UGA, and compare it to those other programs, maybe they have that data too of how, number of applications went up or something. That could be something to also leverage.
Yeah, would be really nice to know. I know that at the moment, most of the programs here, the research, like the applicants are done, or the postdoc applications are done in through a research lab. They would solicit it. So I could ask like a representative sample, but that's a really good point, and it would be really nice to know that information. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jamil. So we'll move on to Shavi, who will be discussing issues related to women's health. I think you're muted.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Chabi, working as a research officer in the Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi, India. Today, I'm here to pitch about the Menstruation Benefit Bill and the menstruation health policies in India. In India, approximately 24% of the girls skip or drop out of school on account of menstruation. In a very shocking incident, a 12-year-old girl committed suicide in India after she was scolded by her teacher for staining her school uniform and the school bench with menstrual blood. An ongoing controversial case of a Sabrimala temple in southern part of India, women who are menstruating are prohibited from entering the temple premises. All these examples prove that marginalization and segregation of menstruating girls and women is very much prevalent in India. So, the young girls grow up thinking that it is a stigma and a taboo to menstruate. I hereby pitch for the menstrual health education to be made part of the curriculum by incorporating it in the education policy of India so that the young girls and boys grow up being educated about this issue and they realize that it is natural and biological to menstruate and not a disease or a disability. The second point which I would like to bring up today is that nearly 25 million women in India suffer from the idea of painful periods or endometriosis. This, coupled with lack of proper sanitation and resting facilities at the workplaces, has caused the female workforce rate to really drop down in the last few years. A MP of Indian Parliament, Nirong Iren, has presented a menstruation benefit bill in the year 2017. The bill talks about granting a 2-day menstruation paid leave to any of the women working in a registered establishment or any girl child studying in class 8 or above. I hereby pitch for this bill to be passed in the parliament and a menstrual leave policy to be made. This would make the female workforce participation to be better, and it would also improve the dropout rates of girls in schools by making education more gender inclusive and gender sensitive. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Shavi. I gave you high scores on all of it. The only change I would make, and it doesn't impact the scores I'm giving you, is I wouldn't address two asks, two topics. I would focus on one and put whatever limited time and energy and emotion and personality and everything into one topic. Because
Right.
you're asking me to split my attention, and I was really compellingly drawn into your first one, particularly because you said, I want this education for men and women, right? So not only talking about it, are you breaking any stigmatization, but in educating both genders allows you to sort of change the culture over time to be more sensitive and responsive to what is indeed biological and natural. So great on that issue. I just wouldn't split my attention and ask me to address two issues at once.
Thank you so much.
I agreed with Matthew. At the end of your first segment, I was really like still absorbing and almost recovering from that information. You know, this is just really horrible what those young women are going through. And then I was kind of hoping for more of like sticking of the landing at the end. And so maybe there could be like, we call it a bumper sticker, but like you could tie it to a vision. I have a vision where, young Indian children grow up knowing that menstruation is normal and healthy or something like that. And it has like sort of that resonant end and it's very memorable. And because when you started segment 2, I was like, oh crap, I'm not ready. I'm still like, all wrapped up in segment number 1.
Okay.
But otherwise, really, really great job.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to just move on to the next person just to keep on time. So we'll have Emily talking about precautionary food labeling.
Hello, I'm Emily. Representative Games, my name is Emily McIntyre, and I'm a microbiology PhD candidate at the University of Georgia. Ensuring that people have access to the information they need to make informed decisions on their health is incredibly important on both an individual level and for national public health. I'm here both as a scientist and as someone with a life-threatening allergy to peanuts to ask for your support on legislation standardizing precautionary food allergen labeling. These precautionary statements found on nutrition labels, are often called PALs, include statements about food allergens that products may contain or have accidentally come into contact with during manufacturing. There's no cure for food allergies, and severe reactions require immediate hospitalization and oftentimes costly medical treatment. So avoiding allergens is the best and simplest way that a food allergic individual can protect their health. However, current labeling requirements are not always sufficient to allow for this. As of now, labeling requirements are specified for foods that explicitly contain the 8 most common allergens, and having this information available makes these products relatively easy to avoid. However, these requirements do not extend to common allergens that foods may have come into contact with during manufacturing or processing. So for example, a plain protein bar that's packaged on the same line as a bar made with peanut butter may end up containing trace amounts of peanuts, which would be more than enough to cause a reaction in many severely allergic individuals. The company could choose to include a PAL stating this. However, they're not required to, and the words or phrasing that they use are not standardized. There are dozens of variations of PALs used, and they may include terms or phrases such as may contain, produced in a facility, processed on shared equipment, and these can give very vague or confusing information to the consumer. Changing these precautionary labels to both a limited and simpler system will make PALs more understandable, will allow people to protect their health, and can also benefit the companies that produce these products. One company that I previously contacted had a very generic PAL on their products, and it would give the impression to both me and many other food allergic individuals that they should not eat it. However, they had later clarified to me that they regularly cleaned and tested their equipment for these common allergens, and now I would feel comfortable buying their product. I know that not everyone has the time or ability to consistently contact companies with unclear labels, and this can further limit food choices. To compound on this can make things even more difficult for the millions of Americans that live in food deserts or even younger children just trying to understand labels. A significant number of allergic reactions involve foods believed to be allergen-free, but may have been improperly labeled or misunderstood. So improving labeling would help contribute to fewer food reactions, hospitalizations, and deaths among allergic individuals, while also reducing healthcare expenses. Specifically, I'm calling for legislation expanding on the 2004 Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protections Act that outlines standardized PAL requirements that would both limit and clearly define a simple, understandable set of terms to be used in these labels. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Emily. I'm Melinda. And so I have a question about the cost of this, because the way that I'm hearing it, it sounds like the standardization of language would be really a cheap ask to the policymakers, because the costs would be on the product makers. So can you sort of monetize what this would cost to, like, what is this kind of like a not much money out of my coffers in order to have a pretty big impact? Or is there, who's paying, I guess, is sort of, was this on the person you're asking or on others?
That's a great question. So the cost would be minimal for lawmakers, and even for the manufacturers that would end up producing the labels, it may not be that much of a cost increase. So what I'm asking for specifically is the legislation just basically limiting and better defining the labels to be used. And because of the 2004 Act, there's already a lot of baseline testing done, and companies have a general idea of how they should be labeling their products. And so specifically for the companies that would be changing their labels, how I envision this is that there would be just a tiered set of terms, basically better defining risk, and the information would then be available on FDA websites and things like that. And also this, like I said, this can benefit the companies, because now there are multiple companies that if I felt safer about consuming their products, I would buy more of their products. And so some of these costs may be returned to them in the form of profit.
Great, thank you.
So I think I'm confused, because the first part of your pitch is that I felt like it was that there aren't labels indicating to people that have allergies, food related allergies, so that they're risking, death or illness. The manufacturers are risking your life, right? But toward the end, I felt like you were just saying like, all I'm requesting you to make a law is to make the vocabulary the same, right? And so if that is the solution, why does it take a law? And is it perhaps better to ask for an audit of health of facilities to protect people's health if this is really a problem?
So right now, there are a lot of labels used, but first of all, this act would also mandate that these precautionary labels are used, because right now, two products that are produced in the same way by different companies, they can choose whether or not they include this precautionary label, so long as it doesn't actually have those common allergens in it. But two bars or two products produced in the same way could have completely different labels or completely different phrasing in the precautionary region. So this would be specifically requiring that if there is a risk, if there is potential cross-contamination that's likely, or if they're on the shared equipment, requiring that that label is used, and then also better defining the set of terms, because the terms they can use, it's basically up to the companies.
So really the government or the industry doesn't have a threshold at which they have to put on a label?
Not for the precautionary labels, no. It's only for the top 8 allergens that are directly or explicitly included in those products.
So the precautionary labels tells more allergens. Like in
Yes.
France, there are like 13, I think, right? So you want an extension of the allergens.
Both an extension of the allergens, and so if a food contains peanuts, the label's required to state that.
Right.
But if it doesn't contain peanuts, but it's made on the same manufacturing line and it likely came into contact with peanuts, they're not required to include that information.
Okay, so there would be a threshold aspect.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to emphasize another point we made earlier, is that you're talking to human beings. And so it's good that you put a personal context around this, because as the legislator you're talking to, you don't know, and I'm sharing something true, but you don't know this. I have a son who has fatal food allergies. So if the legislator you're talking to goes, oh, you know what, I have the same issue, you've reached them sooner. So that's why you should put in the personal thing, because you might actually make that connection. And also because two things you can do. One of them is, because you did that, I'm going to refer you to a nationwide specialist who you might get a letter of endorsement from or something for your ask. So Dr. Hugh Sampson at Mount Sinai is one of the leading experts on peanut allergies, for example. But you might also, all of you might ask at the end, are there others that you can help, be champions for this? In state and federal legislatures, there are caucuses, groups of legislators who agree on a topic, who might help champion this. Like, can you start a letter and have these caucus members sign this in support of my ask, right? So all those points come out of the very fact that you made this a personal, story behind it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I work with the legislature in California, and California Manufacturers and Trade Association is the trade association that really represents a whole bunch of manufacturers. And so I may not, if I were a legislator making the pitch to me, I might refer you to that organization, and that organization, is changing labels or requesting changing labels. So it might not be a legislative policy ask. So finding out who you would pitch it to would be an opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you very much for all your feedback.
I have one quick comment. Go ahead, Frank.
I wanted to say that, and maybe for the future ones, if you can find an opportunity to stand, I think that it's making your guys' pitch and performance better. So I've just noticed that on a couple of you guys. Some are sitting, and I know it's our, we're in COVID times and we're sitting at our dining room table or on a couch. I'm in a hotel room right now, so it's not always possible. But if in the future, when you're doing it professionally, I would definitely recommend standing up.
One comment I had was to take the opportunity to add drama to your story. So to the extent, if you're comfortable, you mentioned that you yourself have an allergy. I don't know if you'd ever been exposed in a way that had made you, really sick, or someone that made them really sick. Like, I don't have a sense of like how small the contaminant can be to induce like a really horrible reaction, and what that reaction even looks like. Is it, your skin flushing or hives or your throat closing up? That all sounds incredibly scary and painful, not only for you, but for your family. And so again, it's dramatic, it's urgent, it's personal. And so I think that helps sort of paint a picture of like the catastrophe we're trying to avoid if the reader, unlike Matthew, doesn't have personal experience with it.
No, yeah, I've had multiple experiences where I've had to go to the ER from foods that have been cross-contaminated and had multiple scares, and those symptoms you described are what I experienced. So that's a good point.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
So next we have Karthik, who will be discussing food and dietary supplements regulation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karthik Yarlagada, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, where I study the bacteria that live in our gut, otherwise known as the gut microbiome. Now, there are a lot of diseases and conditions out there that we don't currently have solutions for. But the microbiome, as this new and upcoming form of research, has a lot of promise for producing the next generation of therapeutics. One of the ways in which the American people have already taken to this idea is through the usage and consumption of probiotics. Anyone can go into their local grocery store and find shelves full of these bottles of bacteria in pill form that promise to treat a variety of conditions. But knowing which probiotic is going to be useful for your specific case can be really tricky, and inconsistent labeling of probiotics only amplifies the difficulty of that decision. I'm reaching out today because I think we can draft legislation that standardizes the labeling of probiotics and increases the base amount of information that they're required to contain, so that Americans have the tools they need to make an informed decision about what they're putting in their body. As it currently stands, someone could go into a grocery store with an upset stomach and decide to try out a probiotic instead of Pepto-Bismol. Someone else who's maybe had a bit of a rough year, has been building up some mental stress and anxiety, might go into their grocery store and pick out the same probiotic, and neither of these individuals might actually find the treatment or relief that they're looking for. We can help these people by making sure that the legislation we pass asks manufacturers to include the bare minimum amount of information so that Americans, again, have the information that they need at a glance when comparing these probiotics and choosing one that is going to be safe, effective, and healthy for them. With that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Maybe we can just have a couple of questions.
Just another reiteration of a comment made earlier that if you add, a fun fact, it becomes memorable. Like, I don't know anything about microbiome science, but I remember talking to a microbiome scientist who made the fun fact that half of the cells in our body aren't us. And that gives me a linchpin to think about this issue and listen to you with a little more deeply and be able to, like someone else mentioned earlier, go off tonight to a party or a Zoom party or something and talk about this because you get something to anchor this to.
Okay, thank you.
Could you tell me a little bit more about what would constitute the bare minimum amount of information needed for the average consumer to make an informed choice? I guess if the label said this bottle, each pill contains 10,000 parts per million of coli, whatever. Like, I don't, is that good for like my complexion? Is that going to clear my headache? And so I guess I'm wondering what type of information would be informative for the consumer if they don't know much about probiotics?
Yeah, so it's really about making sure that the consumer doesn't have to go searching for that information if they wanted to compare those things. The three types of information that I'm thinking we can include in this kind of legislation would be the type of bacteria, so the name. This is information that's well known to the manufacturer and that is a matter of public domain, but that the manufacturer is not required explicitly to include. And so the consumer could end up spending a great deal amount of time searching for it. The second thing would be the shelf life of the product, which is again something that would be known to the manufacturer, but is very variably included on these labels. And then the third thing, like you just mentioned, is actually the concentration, which can be tricky on the manufacturer's end. And so that might be a matter that's a bit more up for debate, but is also useful to the consumer in being able to compare similar or related species and knowing which one is most likely to actually have an impact on their overall gut ecosystem.
That was fantastic. I would put that in your pitch. That was like a burning question for me. It was like, what information is missing? Like, what do I need to know? That was perfect. I would put that in your pitch.
If I had more than 2 minutes.
I think you got to kick something else out. Put that in there. It feels pretty crucial.
Yeah, to Karthik, to your point, I think it was a famous author once said, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time.
It was Mark Twain.
Yeah, Mark Twain. It is possible to distill this. We had a pitch competition at Fullerton where entrepreneurs had to get up and give their entire business plan in 60 seconds. So it can be done. You just have to take stuff out.
Yeah, I had multiple versions. And so, you know, on some points I do include it, and some points I don't. So it is a bit of a give and take. But I do appreciate the feedback regardless.
Great, thank you. So now we'll move on to Ale, who will talk to us about improving STEM literacy by diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hi, Senator Loeffler. My name is Ale Villegas. I am a first-generation grad student and a Georgia resident. Briefly, I would like to tell you why and how you should support diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. As you know, we exist in a global race for STEM skills, and the United States is currently lacking. The National Association of Manufacturing and Deloitte report that the United States will have to fill about 3.5 million STEM jobs by 2025, with more than 2 million of these going unfilled because of the lack of highly skilled candidates in demand. This lack of highly skilled candidates is the result of multiple things, two of them being ignorance among K-12 students about STEM career opportunities and the existing gender and racial opportunity gaps. One way you can help boost the number of American STEM skilled candidates is by supporting the STEM Opportunities Act of 2019 and the Minority Serving Institutions STEM Achievement Act. As a woman and first-generation college student, I was lucky to attend one of these minority serving institutions where I first learned about research opportunities and where I received the encouragement and mentorship I needed to succeed in STEM. These bills will help this be the case for many other young minds. I ask that you support the STEM Opportunities Act of 2019 and the Minority Serving Institutions STEM Achievement Act, which will support data collection to determine the best practices to recruit, retain, and promote historically underrepresented persons in STEM, and will provide funding to minority serving institutions to help educate the much needed American STEM skilled professionals to win this global race. This handout summarizes what I have spoken to you about today, and if you should have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Very clever, by the way, to put in your 2-minute pitch that you have a handout, because you just bought more time, which is very clever, very clever. Yeah, I think it was all very strong. I'm passionate about this topic because creativity and innovation is the domain of the human race, not just any particular group, not just STEM, not just anybody else. So there are solutions that we're not getting because we're not reaching the underrepresented groups. So that's a very strong point and a very meaningful one to pursue action for. So thank you.
I really loved this presentation. I thought it was extremely well organized. It was a beautiful flow. I liked your use of statistics in the beginning. I know that time is really, really tight. Maybe at the end where you're talking about solutions, that's where I wish there was just like just a bit more time to expand on like, here's what we know works. So I was trying to write it down, but you know, recruiting, retaining, and promoting, and then there's some other stuff. So perhaps you could use a list and slow it down, like first, you know, blah, 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 blah. And like second, I think that helps the reader sort of latch on to what you're saying. Because I think when we spend, you know, 90 or a minute and a half describing the problem, and then you have a quick 20 to 30 seconds for the solution, you know, sometimes you want a bit more meat there about, you know, what are we really going to do?
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ale. So we'll move on to Pawan, who, as you can see, is at the airport. So we're going to play the video that he sent Harinder.
Yes, give me a second. I just want to make sure that I do things right. Okay. Okay, let's see if this works.
Hello, this is Dr. Pawan Upadhyay.
Can you turn up the volume?
Can you hear now?
Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, New York constituency. I'm here.
No, it's still very low.
Can everyone hear it or no? You about a very important bill that is HR 4537, mobile health.
I'm going to go back start again because there was a little bit of problem with the sound.
This speech is for Congressman Clay in Missouri. Hello, this is Dr. Pawan Upadhyay, a biomedical scientist at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, New York constituency. I'm here today to discuss with you about a very important bill that is HR 4537, Mobile Health Clinics Act, is related to a very important issue close to your heart, that is affordable health care for all Americans. As you know that this year really been hard for everyone in general, but especially for poor and marginalized communities to avail basic healthcare services during this pandemic. Congressman Clay, I know that you have been fighting throughout your entire political career for affordable and comprehensive healthcare for all Americans, as it is evident from your unconditional support to pass Obamacare Act. And supporting this bill would be another opportunity to advance your motto for affordable and comprehensive health care for all Americans, especially when your party just came in power. This excellent innovative model system is called mobile health clinics. These are the clinics on wheel which go into communities to offer healthcare services. Let me share with you some of the features of these mobile health clinics. According to Mobile Health Report, the coverage of these clinics are across the United States. That is about 2,000 clinics operate across the United States. And about 6.5 million people visit every year. In terms of accessibility and equity, since these clinics go into communities' doorsteps, they are highly accessible than any other modern system in healthcare. And in terms of equity, they offer around 90% people services who are from uninsured or publicly insured, 70% of people from Latin, Hispanic, and Black African Americans, and about 42% are people who are children's. And also, they also cover equally male and females. In terms of type of services, they provide from primary care to dental care to preventive care, and especially during acute natural disaster like current pandemic, they have been doing COVID screening, going to communities, and especially when we have to practice social distancing. And they can be also useful in vaccination, which we are planning in coming year. In terms of cost, they offer 12-fold return for every dollar spent. And this is primarily because they avoid emergency visits, they avoid transportation costs, and they do preventive care, which saves a lot of money for healthcare. However, there are challenges. And because of these challenges, United States has not been able to realize their full potential for healthcare delivery. And first of the challenge is the funding. They are funded by philanthropic and NGO, but not from federal and state funding. And they also doesn't have IT-enabled infrastructure. And this bill proposes to overcome both of these challenges. And therefore, I'm here today to seek your support by passing this bill by voting yes in the Congress. I have shared one-pager info sheet with the staffer, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much for your time and kind attention.
Thank you. So if you have questions for Pawan, he can answer.
This isn't so much a question as just to point out one of the things that Pawan did and a few other people previously have done is to connect to the person they're speaking to by thanking them for previous support. I think this is a great tactic because if you don't acknowledge the person's past efforts, or it's possible then that what they're going to do is just give you a list of all the things they've already done, rather than really hear what it is that you want them to do in the future. They might revert back to all the things they've done in the past, and everybody likes to receive a compliment. So it's a really good way to engage and then also have a good recipient in the person that you're speaking to, into your audience.
Yeah, so thank you for the comment. I was researching, I found out Obamacare app, and he mentioned that in his biography on his website. I thought that would be good to say it in beginning. Yeah.
I thought it was very well done. I think it points out a very clear opportunity for the government to intercede. And by the way, you give these presentations in front of 10 judges, you'll get 10 different, sources of feedback, some of which conflict. I think there was a little bit too much on the benefits, and then you shifted into the challenges, and you almost ran out of time, in my sense. I got the gist. I'd be wanting to know more if I was the legislator, but in the time allotted, I think you could have spent a little more time on the challenges, because that's what's going to motivate me to make a change in society. So
Yeah, I put in my notes the same thing. Is like, I wasn't sure why this isn't being supported if they were already a champion, and so maybe you would want to address the opposition. So what's giving the legislator a challenge to actually address this?
So I think primarily it's being like they are kind of satellite clinics, and since they don't have funding directly from government or any backup, they just operate seasonally. So that has like, so if the services are not continued, people don't trust them. That what is the guarantee that they're gonna come next time, right? And since there is no backup support from federal or state government, so um, that's where it's being really like they're not able to really give services. And since we don't have any law, any regulation much there, it's more of individual initiative. So yeah.
If any unknown person attempts to give you any item, including luggage, to drop on your
I'll add, like one of the first comments, really appreciated you connecting this to an issue that the person you're advocating to like really cares about, right? And I think you don't have to make the argument about why this is important as much, because they're already invested in healthcare as an issue. I thought you mentioned repeating several times affordable healthcare was really good to like continue harping that this is the goal, right? Affordable healthcare, and I like that resonated throughout. I was looking for a little bit more of the like metrics from places that have deployed these models or that are experimenting with these models. Like, what are we learning from them, right? That's really positive feedback, whether it's sort of payback or improvements in health metrics. A little bit of that would have been helpful. It's always scary to be like the first person to adopt a new model, but if you see other people, working well with other people, that's helpful to reinforce.
So that I have included some part in one page or info sheet, and it's had an image and graphs and kind of examples. So
yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Pawan. Thanks for all your comments. So last but not least, we have Farah, who will be talking about COVID-19 and masks and other related issues.
Hi, are you hearing me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, good, okay. Dear Senator Mike Lee, I'm glad to meet you today. My name is Farah Ostati. I'm a molecular biologist worrying about the highest new COVID-19 cases in the US. Do you know that 8 of the top 10 states with the highest new cases per capita in October are still not wearing the mask? Based on available scientific data, the coronavirus has spread through respiratory droplet transmission. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, recommended carrying out 4 simple public health measures to prevent COVID-19: mask wearing, keeping distance, avoiding crowds, and washing hands. With a lackluster government response due to the presidential elections, resistance to mask wearing has become alarming. This poses a daunting challenge to the nation's medical experts. People have been left on their own to follow the guidance and advice provided by public health experts to control the pandemic. I'm certain that you believe and trust that science is of high importance right now in the US. Recently, over 240,000 people died. Almost 100,000 new positive cases were diagnosed yesterday. This urgent situation is putting US healthcare system under immense pressure. Actually, we can just rely on a vaccine. We've got to rely on people adherence to mask wearing. In October, the states with no mask mandate witnessed soaring caseloads and hospitalizations. That's why we should pull together. We urgently need you to add us to drive senators to issue mandates requiring everyone in public places to wear a mask in their states. You know, the CDC and researchers reported that in states following mask mandate, COVID-19 cases dropped by up to 75%, and mask wearing could reduce the severity of the virus if a citizen is affected. Another major advantage is that businesses and schools open. So your action will be big. You can save merely citizens' lives and national economy. Your support for the mask mandate is absolutely precious. So thank you for your support and your attention.
Thank you, Farah. Any questions?
Obviously, a very timely topic. I would have acknowledged, even though you're directly asking for, a mask mandate, I would have acknowledged that there is a social price to pay for that in terms of economic disruption. Just to acknowledge it so that they know that you're aware of it, but still ask for the mask mandate. And obviously, people fall in different positions on this spectrum. But if you're going to take a stand, I think it would be helpful to acknowledge the cost or the impact of what you're asking.
Okay. Yes.
Anyone else? Any comments?
I'll reiterate one of the things that Matt said. I mean, I think that the way that you presented the data and really being so on top of what's happening right now, if you consider this something that you might be doing multiple times over a long period of time, always staying current like that, that's what's going to help really sell it. If you start having 1 week, 2 week old information or harping back to something that's even older, it can lose the punch of how critical the current situation is. And I thought that's what was so effective here, was really just bringing to attention something a lot of us know and have heard, but just reiterating, this is where we are right now and how critical it is that we really think about doing something differently from now and forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So do you mean that maybe I should compare between two different times or different data from several times?
No, what I think was, effective today might not be effective on December 9th, a month from now, right? So just making sure that when you present this, if it's in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're using you look that data up that morning, you get the current information so that because that's going to actually help your credibility and authority. So I think it was very effective, but also it's going to lose its punch in even just a matter of 3 days, 1 week. And that's what I want to just make sure that you recognize was so effective and needs to be done each time you go into a new room, into a new situation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Farah. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to just give you 1 minute to finish up your scores, and then we'll have a discussion while Harinder counts.
Absolutely. Thank you. This was a wonderful session. So I'm just waiting for everyone to submit their scores. And after that, Adriana is going to run a brief Q&A or a discussion session, and that'll give me enough time to tally the scores and announce the winners. Okay, I think we are done. I have received all the 7 responses. And give me like 15-20 minutes. I'll be back with the final answers.
I don't know if I can keep it going that long. I think, so one of the things, finishing up with Farah, we have been talking about this, and there's a lot of issues in this course that we've discussed in terms of research as well as education policy, which have been covered today. Since then, the pandemic has started. We now have a new administration. There's a lot of things we could be discussing. So just sort of an open-ended question of those of you who have been around working on these issues and the several administrations, what are your general thoughts about how policies will change given what's going on now with the pandemic and the new administration related to science and education? I know it's a big question, but hopefully we can start from that.
Feels dangerous to jump in.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of core issues that will continue to be worked behind the scenes, because even though the leadership changes, a lot of the staff remains the same except for the immediate, administration staff. So a lot of the government officials are career government officials, and a lot of the issues will be worked in the background just as they always have been. It's going to be on the real controversial issues where we're going to see changes, obviously. What we don't know is where the new administration will shift funding resources, for example, and that money talks. That's where things are going to get done, and I've said that a lot in this and other formats for this group. So it's going to remain to be seen where the funding goes for the next fiscal year, and whether they can get congressional support behind it.
Yeah, I'm also wondering from the standpoint of what our list is working on, and what do you think that looks like at the local level as well, or in California?
Well, yeah, I'm hopeful. One of the challenging things I think about local policy is that it's so different city to city, right? Based on who's elected as decision makers every 2 years. In Costa Mesa in particular, in case any of you are residents there, we have you could say there's a strong majority on our council now. So I expect to see quite a bit of activity because many of us on our council are sort of like-minded in what we agree to be the priorities. Our challenge will be deciding which of those priorities make the top of the list, given the economic conditions of certainly this year and the impacts of that on the next couple of years. Thinking about, even that funding issue it connects all of the levels of government, right? We're going to rely a lot on what we can get from the county and the state, and there are certainly decisions at the federal level, stimulus funds related to COVID that have a huge impact on our local decisions. What I'm hopeful about, and I think every update I get from the New York Times sort of changes my expectations about this, but what I'm hopeful about is that policymakers are able to start working together again. It feels like there's been just so much grandstanding that we're not even having conversations about solutions. We're not even using the data coming out of research labs anymore. And that's, as a engineer and scientist myself, that's been very difficult, that we can't base our discussions and decisions in research and data. So I'm hopeful that there's a sort of a renewed acceptance of science as something that should be an important part of our conversations.
Yeah, I think I would say we're probably all hoping for that, and a lot of us here are or have been scientists that transition into policy, and so being in that space, I think it's an interesting time. So one of the things, since you and Matt both brought this up, what do you think are the main issues that will be discussed now, or you would want to hear about in policy?
Are you asking at the federal level, or?
Yeah. Or both.
Yeah, I think clear number one is the COVID, the new administration elect identified their COVID task force today, heavily science, obviously. But beyond that, they then have to shift to some sort of balance between, the pandemic and the economy. And then they have to address issues like foreign relations and climate and all those things that are on the agendas. Whether you agree with them or not, they've laid out what their main priorities are going to be. And I think that's going to dictate the conversations, the funding, the prioritization. But to echo what Arliss said, I think there may be an opportunity here for actual more discussion, right? And realizing that we all have common goals regardless of where we're coming from. Some of these are no-brainer common goals, right? And it's really a question of how to address them, not grandstand, to borrow Arliss's word again. So I think the agendas are clear. We know what the priorities are. We just have to, support the informed discussion of those things.
I would also add from both the legislative side, but also just within the executive branch, that there's a lot that can and should be done to restore the role of science and how it informs government decision making. And putting more protections in place to protect scientists who are speaking out against political interference in their work, so that they can speak out if that continues to be an issue, and to prevent some of the damage if there are future anti-science administrations. So, some of the more behind the scenes roles of how science informs decision making, I hope is on the radar for this administration, and is something that scientists can push for, that I think is more bipartisan than pushing for, a Green New Deal, for example, or election reform, which is going to be another hot button issue on the agenda.
Yeah, I think one of the things we also have to keep in mind, and I reiterate some of the things that Melissa was just saying, because some good work was done in terms of scientific integrity through Obama that has definitely been hit in the last 4 years. That can be repaired, but if you look from Bush to Obama to where those issues ebbed and flowed in the agencies, you've got a lot of people who chose retirement and chose to leave those positions. And so you lose a lot of people with a lot of institutional memory and knowledge. This is especially of concern in a place like EPA, which next month will celebrate its 50th year of existence. They're losing a lot of their people who have 40 plus years of information and knowledge, 30 plus years. And some of them by early retirement because they're tired. Their morale is really low. And so to rebuild and to regain and transform that morale is so difficult. It doesn't just happen because it's January 20th at noon and there's a new administration, and it takes time to rebuild. And this is my cat. So it's just really difficult because there's a lot going on inside the agencies, the people who do the work day to day, that takes a long time to transform.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I was sort of thinking about this already from your perspective, Melinda, since you have sort of this perspective of history and policy. And so what do you see, as the future of the field, or how we can rebuild?
I think for part of it is, we go through this, we do this dance every 4 to 8 years, right? Or 12, it just depends on what happens, right? But we build and we undo, and that's just part of the process. What you also though see, and we saw this, is when you have a turnover like this, there can also be a huge turnover in who chooses to work for the US government. So you have an influx of a lot of people who decide to actually go to DC or to go, to a state capital and work and change directions in their own careers because they buy into what it is that this administration will do and the goals. And so I think there's also something to look forward to and to be excited about as well. But it's just to say that there are challenges. And I think, you know, and it's hard too, because we have this extra dimension of pandemic. And we have just been pouring money out. And we're already starting to see where people are saying, restrain your budgets on academic campuses, make new decisions, make hard decisions. And we're going to be feeling this for several years. And it's all of that trickles down, right? It affects how many graduate students you have, what kinds of grad programs do you support or don't, postdocs, all that. And that also means that more people are going after the federal funding and money or the philanthropic money, and there's not necessarily more of it out there to get. And so that, it just becomes more competitive. So I think there's going to be just so much of this. It's just going to be a long time of watching all of this shake out. And it's going to be a slow process. And I think it's, in some ways, there's going to be a lot of hardship, right? That still has to be endured, because this is of how long, we still don't know how long, right? The economy might be constrained.
I liked your comment about, people choosing to leave government with institutional knowledge, as well as new people coming in. At a much smaller level, I understand, without any expertise, that's happening at the higher education level too, in the sense that students are not enrolling in community colleges by, I don't know what the factor is, it's like 20% down or something like that. 10%, 5 to 10% at the four-year college level. So there's actually less new people to train, right? To educate, to prepare for the workforce. So there's a little bit of a setback, even at the educational level, for the next generation coming through. I have no crystal ball. I don't know what it all means. But every organization, university or government or anything, the upper level, it's always tumultuous, right? 2 to 4 years turnover, etc. And then you have, it's like the ocean. There's a lot of waves on top, and down at the bottom, it's sort of, all the same people there for 50 years. So once you understand that that's been true for 200 years, it's a little more easy to take emotionally, but it doesn't mean, that there's an immediate fix to it, because there isn't. There's always going to be this turmoil. We just need to sort of dampen down how much turmoil we have to deal with from one administration to the other.
Yeah, and that's something I'm personally really interested in, and have been for a while. How do we train the workforce to address some of these things? So I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on that and what that means for people who are going into policy now and starting out.
Can you ask that question again? Sorry.
Yeah, so just about how we should train our scientific workforce who is interested in going into policy now and making that transition, grad students who are transitioning in this environment that we're in now.
Well, I posted one link, 314action.org, which is a nonprofit organization training scientists to run for office. As someone who had zero interest in public policy 4 years ago, I am now a city council member now, and can attest to the fact that it's not as hard to get in office as it might sound like. Not that I didn't work hard, but it's certainly accessible. And I am repeatedly taken aback by how much sort of power and influence we have. It's at the local level that we can set mask mandates, for example. I'm one of, in my city, one of 7 votes. In many cities, it's one of 5 votes to say, we are going to shut down restaurants. We are going to, enforce rules that comply with these health orders, or we're not. So I genuinely believe that one of the most important things we need to do in having governments that make better decisions is getting more scientists in those decision-making roles.
And I think
also said.
Go ahead.
Just piggybacking off that, I think that was really well said. If we want to see science as a more integral part of the policy ecosystem, then we ought to think, we ought to more comfortably think of scientists, as a valid constituency and valid members of the political ecosystem. And so I think graduate training programs to do better to stop seeing science policy as like a exit parachute for those who may be sort of disillusioned with their academic experience, and more of a, just another valid, fruitful pathway. This is a way that we're training a segment of people who are going to be civil servants, to provide that evidence-based, very empirically driven perspective. And so I think the current sort of national consciousness we're experiencing right now has only highlighted how important it is to have people who really appreciate evidence and follow the facts, and how damaging, devastating it can be when that is missing. And so I hope that it encourages graduate programs across the nation to think of us less as like an alternative career and just as a career.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you. And I think one of the things that has come up a lot recently is thinking more about the broader impacts of science and the research that grad students are doing. So I've been hearing some things about maybe, I think some schools or just some labs that have have their students have a science policy chapter as part of their dissertation, which I think is a really interesting idea to bring that broader impacts to what they're already doing. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
It's just an observation that we can connect dots and project how things might happen, and then we can also be surprised, right? So the pandemic has disproportionately hit underrepresented groups, and at the same time, we've talked today about doing more to attract and outreach and connect with underrepresented groups to bring them into the STEM fields, and those two might intersect. That might motivate more of them to get involved because they've been impacted so hard, right? They personally experienced it, and that sometimes motivates people to take action, get involved, whether it's as a scientist or a policymaker or whatever. So I'm hopeful that society will surprise us also with some new leaders coming up because of these types of intersections.
Yeah, I think that's another interesting point. And this is something that we have been working on also. I wish Gary was still here at Future of Research in terms of improving the research enterprise. And, we're encouraging people to stay in science, but the system doesn't help with that. And so we're just perpetuating this, I don't know, these issues that are already there. And we're saying more people need to get into it, but we're really not fixing the system to help them out. So, yeah, thanks for that comment.
So, if I may, Adriana, I have a question / comment for the group myself. Do we have time?
Yes, go ahead.
What I'm hearing from early career researchers that are, for example, at the National Science Policy Network, and are interested in science policy, if from the perspective of someone who stays in academia but engages in policy, as a sort of secondary activity. But then they see how professionals like, for example, Dr. Anthony Fauci are treated on the national stage. This is someone who is a, highly decorated, extremely, just like university lauded in the scientific community expert, and yet he can still receive, be treated with difficulty, by certain segments of the political spectrum. And so I think students look at that and say, he must be doing something wrong, or if his behavior ends up being politically charged, perhaps there's something wrong with the situation, or perhaps he's doing something wrong. And so I guess I'm sort of wondering how to respond to that. Part of me thinks that perhaps that's the price of admission when you're sort of at that level, and there's been the politicization of science. But I guess my question is, for a while, there's been, I guess, this idea that science is not political. It should be very dispassionate and neutral. You shouldn't really be making anyone angry if you're doing your job correctly. But we're seeing more and more that that's like just not the case, even if you're a model citizen. So how do we sort of train the next generation to be like, to expect that and to be resilient to
I think you start putting them on murder boards, if that's a phrase you're familiar with, where it's kind of like this, where you train them to defend truth and fact, right? Because you will upset people whether you want to or not, because there are people on the, all across the political spectrum who look at you through a particular lens and not like what you say. And it's a great point in general. Maybe it falls in the softer skills training, which is how do you equip people to deal constructively with, argumentative opposing forces. If we can do that, that's part of leadership training too, is to still stand in your position even when you're under attack. And that takes training, and you can start that at any age by putting them through, again, murder boards or whatever you want to call it, where they're challenged to keep their cool but still, speak truth. So that's not a really helpful answer, but it's an acknowledgement. It's a great recommendation that we need to build that into our training, is to challenge them with extreme opposing views, so that they can, stand their ground.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
think that's go ahead.
I was just saying thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think there's a lot more scientists now who are interested in even getting more involved in activism, and it's not always something that's encouraged in universities, but a lot of young people are doing this now, so it's worth thinking about that. How we're sort of training them to do that more, but yeah, the balance between what they're doing in science and their policy beliefs and actions on that.
And I think to Chanel's question, this idea that science isn't political is not helpful in those situations, because science is political. It doesn't have to be partisan, but thinking about all of the political dynamics that are at play, I think can help set you up for better preparing for potentially contentious situations, can help you think through what the opposition might be to when you're bringing up facts and evidence, and how to mitigate some of those arguments against them. I think we've clearly seen that facts are not enough in this day and age, and thinking through different strategies about messaging and preparing for dealing with different audiences is going to be imperative for scientists, especially in more public-facing roles moving forward.
I think you bring up a great point, Melissa, and that this whole forum for the students is valuable to make them realize that politics isn't bad. Okay, it's like, money's not bad, it's what you do with it. Politics is just human relations in the social sphere. It can be very helpful, very productive. It can even be partisan, because that's the debate of ideas, right? But it can get ugly, and that's what you want to do, is avoid it from becoming so extremely partisan that there's no constructive dialogue going on. But politics, we all deal with politics every second of our life, because it's just human interaction. We just put a label on it when it's in the social sphere. So if we're not afraid of it, we can go into there, equipped with all of our normal skills to be able to have a conversation. But we do need to be equipped on how to handle, extreme positions.